Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Welcome to HighRoad U. We are a qualified, HighRoad Solution is a qualified provider of CAA credits from ASAE. As many of you are familiar with now, I am Manisha Menges, Director of Inbound Marketing at HighRoad U. I've got more than 15 years of experience in digital marketing. I'm very excited to be working at HighRoad with a number of our clients, essentially assisting them in navigating through digital marketing. The market's definitely seeing a transformation. There's so many tools that are out there. There's so many things that marketers have to do. You can't rely on one tool such as email marketing anymore. So it's really exciting to kind of be in the association market at this time frame, leveraging all of these different tools. So there are multiple ways to connect with me. I encourage you to reach out to me via Twitter or LinkedIn. Certainly, I can provide my contact information as well. We do a number of consulting engagements with any number of organizations looking to do a number of things. If they have to come up with a lead gen strategy, look at for member acquisition, if it's an analysis or kind of state of the association in terms of digital marketing and how they're doing today, we do a number of those as well. And we also implement a number of solutions for our clients as well. So what we're going to talk about today, before I get started, I'm going to put this link in the chat window as well, just so that everyone has a chance to see this link. You may have heard us talk about this before. Sorry, I'm the right one. If we are sponsoring, along with Demand Metric, the 2016 State of Digital Marketing Association in Associations. It's a study, it's a marketing research study that's conducted. We've done this for the past 2 years, and the research study is still open. So we strongly encourage you to participate. It's a great way, it's a global research effort, and it really is a great way to provide some global benchmarking for you. So from time to time, we've relied on some of the reports here as part of our discussions, as part of HighRoad U webinars, and so we strongly encourage you to participate. So you get a $5 Starbucks gift card for participating, and you're entered into a drawing, I believe, of a $1,000 prize. I strongly encourage you to participate before the study closes in June. All right. So today we continue with our topic that we're discussing throughout the month of May. It has to do with using social media to grow membership. And essentially what we're talking about today is best practices, things that you can do to influence your success while you're using social media in this aspect. So as always, we'll start with a recap. For those of you who couldn't join us last week, we'll go through some basics. And then we'll delve in a little bit deeper in terms of the criteria that influence success. We'll talk about some things that you can try, and then we will do a little bit of a deep dive into Twitter. So I'm sure everyone has strong reactions or polarized reactions or opinions about Twitter, but it is an interesting case study, and I think it's something that might warrant some attention or consideration. So let's start at the beginning for everyone, right? So I think everyone knows kind of across the board what social media is. I think that it's different from what the situation was 5 years ago, where it was considered rather new. Social media today is kind of the de facto, it's the standard. You need to be on social media, you need to have a presence there, and of course you need to be able to use those channels effectively in your digital marketing campaigns. What's interesting about social media is that it's always tied to constant growth, right? So even 2 years ago, some of these items that you kind of see on your screen, they didn't really exist. Or if they did, they're kind of niche plays. Not a lot of people were kind of using them, but I think you can see now that there's this exponential growth. It's probably been influenced a great deal using mobile devices, smart devices in particular, have helped that exponential growth really kind of expand very quickly. But overall, you'll see things that are familiar. So what's nice about this is that as a marketer today, you don't have to, one, familiarize yourself with how to use the social media tools. They're kind of very standard across the board now. A lot of that institutional knowledge is gone. It's been commoditized. Even if you are to talk about social media to your management teams or to executive leadership, they also know in some capacity what social media is and why we use it. So it's a good place to be from 5 years ago, say, when you were still trying to figure out and try to convince others as to the value of it. But hopefully you see the value of it here in this touch point. And it becomes incredibly relevant when we're talking about digital strategy with regards to marketing overall. So some of the reasons we use social media, again, when we go back to some of those typical characteristics, it's 2.0, Web 2.0 internet-based applications, so that technology. User-generated content is still king, right? We're always trying to get that level of authenticity, that transparency, that high visibility to make sure that the content is really authentic. It's based around data that is user-specific. It has to do with profiles, information that you self-select or self-volunteer. You volunteer that information, and then it's connecting some of that profiles and some of that information that you volunteered to find like-minded people in your community. So some of those typical characteristics of what you will see in social media. So it's definitely different from the traditional media model approach, which is really, it's all tied to, the reach, frequency, usability, immediacy, and quality. So very different kind of slice from the traditional standpoint. So why should we care about social media? And as marketers, we'll come back and tell you that the reach is really interesting to us. It is a very good way for you as an association to get in front of people who don't know your organization, what they do, if they don't know your brand or your program, right? So what's nice about social media, again, from an influential standpoint, is you can amplify your reach a lot faster than if you were to take the traditional route of using search engine optimization, for example, right? So SEO, obviously all your content that's sitting out there on the web, regardless of where it is, should be optimized. But it's a slow play. So if you were to publish content, you need to wait for it to be indexed by Google or other search engines. That generally doesn't take too long, but again, in order for you to kind of register on, the first page of results, you have to be fairly good at, seeding your content appropriately, following best practices from a keyword strategy standpoint, and then, of course, it's a little bit dependent on how competitive your keywords are. Right, so those are things you can influence, but you cannot accelerate those. Those are things that happen organically over a certain period of time. What marketers like about social media, and they will tell you, is that you can get in front of people fairly quickly, right? So either through paid activities or just naturally using inline applications, you can get in front of a very large number of people with minimal effort. What we also like is that you can use social media on a frequent basis. And in fact, you really do want to be as frequently posting and as consistent as possible. So it's a little bit different from the traditional model where, we want to limit ourselves to one email a day. We don't want to send a lot of emails. We don't want to put too many print ads, things like that. This is about, the quality. The quality of your material is good, and it naturally defers into that conversational style of exchange of information, the more you should post, right? So again, it's definitely different from that approach. You'll see your social media marketing team, wherever you've designated, they will likely have a calendar that has frequent posts, right? So one post a day is, depending on what your channel is kind of like the bare minimum, right? So something to think about is definitely something that helps amplify your message and gets it out there. What marketers also like is the usability aspect of it. The iconography is pervasive. And what that means is everybody knows what a like is. They know how to use the software. Whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on Twitter, on Pinterest, or on YouTube, or anywhere, kind of wherever you are in the universe of social media, you know how to like something. You know how to engage with the person who's posting it by sharing or leaving a comment. Right, so those are things that you no longer have to adopt some sort of change management strategy to get people used to the idea and like using the technology. That's become a very kind of big equalizer from that aspect. And so it's very easy to use, and it's something that you no longer have to plan for as a hurdle. The immediacy piece is also it's desirable from a marketing standpoint. It's also a little bit of a challenge. Real time is not only acceptable, it's preferred, right? So of course you can kind of see that from two slices. It's definitely something that's great, because again, you can show your value of the information you're communicating. It's relevant, it's timely, it's apropos. But also it proposes a little bit of a challenge because you have to be on top of it. You cannot come up with topics that are, you can't plan out some of the activities that you do on social media too far in advance. You have to kind of be on your toes and be ready to leverage some of the trends that are going on, that are appearing kind of naturally, organically through these conversations. So it does require your team and your marketers to be a little bit kind of on top of it. They've got their finger on their pulse, kind of seeing what's going on with members today. What's nice about all of this, though, is that really it's about quality. And so for all the materials that you do post on social media, the ones that you'll likely find to be the most successful are ones that are relevant to the audience that you're communicating with, which is really nice because you can cut through the preamble. You don't have to do a lot of build-up. Right? In social media, the expectation is that your tone of voice is sincere, that you're authentic, that you kind of short and to the point in some cases, depending on what vehicle you're in, but essentially you're offering them something of value. And that, of course, is the most important thing that marketers care about because that's about conversion. Right? So these are all the things that why, social media is what it is today and why we highly recommend that it be part of your digital marketing portfolio. So how do you use social media to grow your membership, right? And this is really about generating leads. And it goes back to kind of not necessarily reliance on the technology to generate leads because it's rarely about the platform. It doesn't matter if you're on HubSpot or Marketo. It doesn't matter if you're using one marketing platform over another. What really matters is that your ability to generate leads is independent of the technology you use. It's really about your offer. So you need to have a really good offer. You need to have your call to action. And you need a way to digitally connect all of your properties together. So those are often called integrated marketing campaigns. It's an opportunity or a campaign that essentially thinks of all those different pieces that are sitting out there throughout kind of your advertising channels, throughout your promotional channels, whether they be in the print world, in the digital world, kind of on the email side, whatever it is, they all work together in order to get your message across to the right audience, right? Ensuring, therefore, that your message, your offer gets to the right people who are most likely to do something, in this case, become a member or show interest or express some sort of interest in your association. So if that's the case, right, so the biggest challenge is, again, getting in front of the people who don't know you, right? And this is why social media becomes suddenly so important, because most of the people who are on social media, they fill out, or they're composed of a cross-section of people that you do know, that you are familiar with, and they're also filled with people who you're not familiar with. And as marketers, if you're looking to acquire those new members, if you're looking to generate that kind of acquisitional interest, you really want to pursue the social media circles because you don't have to create the environment or the community for people to come. It's already there, right? So a lot of the work is already done for you because using social media has brought all these like-minded people together, or people who are interested or volunteer to share some of their information with everybody else, so it's public knowledge. Those are the people that you now can talk to. Right, so what's nice about that is now you're kind of essentially fishing in a pond that you previously didn't have access to because you didn't have a pond. Right, so what's nice, again, the value of social media comes in what you can do from an unpaid perspective as well as what you can do from a paid perspective. So the unpaid, again, you can leverage any number of these tools, right? So there is no right percentage mix. I think we were a couple of years ago, kind of demonstrating a preference for saying like, oh, most of our members aren't on Twitter, therefore we're not really on there. It kind of depends how you look at it. Perhaps your members aren't on Twitter, but perhaps your prospects are, right? So again, don't be so quick to dismiss these social media channels because again, depending on your demographic breakup, your makeup of your association, what constricting factors are kind of changing some of the demographics in your membership base, you may need to be in these channels now, right? So you can use Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, your blog that you currently have sitting out there that qualifies and falls under social media as well. There's SlideShare, Pinterest, and your private online communities, right? So these are all your unpaid channels, if you will, inside of the bucket of social media. What you want to do is you want to consider pairing these activities. They're all kind of your communications activities that you use during, using the unpaid vehicles to also combine them strategically with some of your paid activities, right? So the difference is that instead of social media in particular, your paid activities amplify your message, your broadcast message, to a larger, wider audience. But it's not the, the entire world. It still gives you the ability to choose and select your demographics. So your target audience is sitting out there, and using paid social media advertising as part of that, as part of your digital portfolio, allows you to really kind of reach out and find those people who are like-minded, who have the same types of interests, who may perhaps, share the same types of pain points, what they're looking to solve. They may have the same backgrounds, right, from an industry standpoint or an educational standpoint. All those things might be of interest to you, so you can broadcast your message further. All right, so definitely something to think about from that perspective. We often run into a question or a conversation of why do we have to do both, right? So, why can't we just, work the unpaid model, right? And the reality is that you have to get in front of people who don't know you. And the best way to do that is to use a paid social media model as well, right? So you're working in tandem. Both of your pieces are kind of working together, right? Because the intent is to make an impression on those prospects through your meaningful, relatable content, which social media, again, provides you the perfect vehicle, right? It's already setting the stage for information that's timely, information that's relevant, information that's of value. And if you use social media in such a way that you demonstrate this, right, by just, as part of the event or conference, just constantly interrupting the stream of conversations that are happening by saying, come visit us at our booth, right? If you're a part of the conversation, you are accepted into that circle and therefore more likely to be taken more seriously when you're putting an offer in front of your prospects. So essentially it gives you a way to create that awareness that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do because you don't have access to those people in your database. They're unknowns, right? They're unknown quantities. And so this is why we really highly recommend that you do some sort of combination model. It's not to say you put all eggs in one basket where you really have to say, oh, let's put everything in paid. You definitely don't want to do that. But you want to maybe possibly strategically pick out certain campaigns that you're running that you think might benefit from an amplified reach, right? And that's really kind of what we're saying here. So in everything that we talk about, especially with regards to social media, you've likely heard that phrase that content is king, right? Again, it's often bandied about with conversation is king, ultimately goes back to your content. And it's particularly important and critical from an association point of view. One, associations produce content, right? So you certainly, I don't think any association really struggles with producing content. You have a lot of materials, whether they are in the form of webinars, if they're in the form of white papers, abstracts, right, submissions, articles. You have a number of publications, a number of vehicles in which you communicate all this information, right? So in order to be effective, especially in social media, what you really need to do is you need to make sure that you're aligning to your content marketing strategy, right? So the core key principles of content marketing strategy, they revolve around, is your content valuable? Is it relevant? Are you being consistent in kind of the message that you're that's underlying everything that you're putting out there? Right, so none of that has changed. It's really in an effort to use social media to grow your membership, you have to rely on this whole content strategy, this content marketing strategy. So content, again, is king, and it is very important that your content is shareable, right? That's of interest, and it's content that educates. So if you kind of go off the list, you can kind of put a tick mark next to most of them because as associations, that is what you do, right? That is your business. You do create content that educates. You do create content that is of interest to certainly people who are looking to be members, to people who are members. They look to your organization to help them in their professional lives, right? So your challenge, kind of as an association standpoint, is to make sure that you are aligned with your content marketing strategy and you have content that's shareable, right? Because remember, social media is characterized by reach, it's characterized by frequency, usability, immediacy, and quality. So all of these characteristics are things that that are by default in some cases, already leveraged into your content, but definitely leveraged into your content marketing strategy. So when you sit down and you say, okay, we're going to use social media to grow our membership, how are we going to do that? We know that we have to do paid. We know we have to do unpaid. Let's pick our vehicles. We know that some members are here. They're probably out sitting on LinkedIn. We're not quite sure about Twitter. We have a presence on Twitter, but, you know, not really quite sure what we should do. What are we going to do, right? So you really want to sit down and coordinate your campaigns, right? You want to make sure that whatever it is you're trying to do, you're doing it in a coordinated effort where you're leveraging all the different media that are out there so that you can get your message to the best audience, you know, with the right message. And that's typically what an IMC is, more integrated marketing campaign. You may be doing this under other labels, right? So again, if you're running a program, you have to do a promotion for a webinar for a particular program that's leading up to the annual conference, you are likely, you as part of your team are likely kind of sitting out there saying, okay, we're going to put this on our website, we're going to put it in a banner in an email that's going out, we're going to put it on the event website. We are probably going to reach out to some of our sponsors and see if they would like to sponsor this particular webinar as a preamble, right? So all of those things that you're doing, right, all of those activities, they fall into what you're doing as part of an IMC, an integrated marketing campaign. What it means is that you're being strategic in coordinating all the vehicles you have, you're available at your disposal, right? You're using them effectively. In an effort to make sure that your marketing message, right, your ultimate call to action, what you want to do, is received by the greatest number of people. So if you think about that from that perspective, right, and remember, we're always thinking about social in terms of social media and how it overlays on growing membership. You want to think about all the different touch points that you internally as your organization have to be aligned with and have to leverage in order to be successful, in order to influence the results of what your campaigns do in social media. So obviously you need a content calendar. You need to be in sync with your content calendar. You need to also be aligned to your social content publishing calendar, right? So likely your social media team has their own calendar with a very kind of detailed cross-sectional view, I guess probably at least a month out, where they know that they've got pre-scheduled tweets going out, posts, tweets, shares, wherever you are, kind of whatever vehicle you're using, but they've got a full calendar kind of already planned out. It is very challenging to do social media on the fly. You really need, if you are going to do that, you need a dedicated person. And even then, that dedicated person would have to coordinate and be in the know, in the loop with all the other things that are happening inside of your association. That's quite challenging. So typically what we see is we see an organization that sits down, their social media person will plan out the calendar and put it in a spreadsheet format to essentially say on this day we're going to tweet about the following things, because we are doing promotions for webinars that are upcoming. We are doing wrap-up follow-ups for things that have already happened. We know that the annual event open registration is about to start, so therefore we are prepping the stage and sending out these short bursts of information so that people are aware, because you are building awareness from that standpoint. Obviously, you can't have your social media team communicating out random messages that have no alignment with what you're doing on your content calendar side. If they are not kind of working in sync together, right, based on the campaigns that you have to promote, based on the activities that you have to do, you're not benefiting from the full reach of what social media can do for you. So you obviously need alignment from that standpoint. You want to get insight into your upcoming promotional activities, right? All the other activities or programs that are happening inside of the organization across the whole, and then obviously any of your campaigns that are happening. Right, so in order for you to be effective, in order for you to use social media effectively to grow your membership, you need to tap into all these aspects and make sure that you're aware of them, right? So that your team is aware of it and that your social media strategy going forward accounts for all of these campaigns going out. What you also need, right, other things that you want to think about or the things that you want to consider. Obviously, we already talked about this a little bit. You need the ability to promote, right? So from the paid standpoint, you know that you have to get in front of people that don't know you, so you definitely want to consider tapping into that paid portion, that Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, all the sponsored content, sponsored materials, leveraging that so that'll help you. In addition to that, I think this goes back to kind of, again, everything that we often talk about, but it's personas. Right, so it's really kind of, from this standpoint, it's really thinking about what you know about your members, what you know about your prospects, right? Your people who are potential members who haven't quite realized that they need to make that conversion leap, right? And how they operate inside of the social media sphere. How do they consume your information you provide inside of the social media sphere, right? It's not necessarily saying that, oh, well, so-and-so is not on Twitter, therefore we shouldn't be on Twitter. That's not really the point, right? So what you really want to do is, if they're not on Twitter, where are they, right? How do they consume information across the day? It's likely that they are definitely on LinkedIn. It's possible that they're aware of Twitter, but they use it for a different purpose. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Right, so it's thinking about ways in which they consume the information, and then you thinking of ways in turn where you could converse with this persona online in a social media channel. Right, so again, the big component of social media and why it's so powerful is because it's about conversations. It's about virtual networking, virtual communities. It's about like-minded people exchanging ideas or saying something and someone else commenting on it, right? And that's the ideal engagement, right? This is what everyone's looking for, that, we have a piece of information, we have a piece of content, whether it was just a question that was posed and somebody answered saying, oh yeah, so-and-so has a white paper on it, download it here, I'm a member, you should be too, right? That whole exchange is a piece of content. It's a user-generated piece of content, which gives, value in some cases when you're evaluating social media metrics, right? But it's something that helps you do that next step of conversion. So when you're looking at your personas, when you're looking to, update them, especially if you're revisiting them to kind of see how social media plays into kind of where they are and how they consume your information, consider how you should talk to them on social media, right? It may not be a one-on-one conversation, but it's really understanding their behavior and what they might respond to. And then it's also thinking about, and we'll get into this next week, but really thinking about what you want that responsive behavior to be. Is it more kind of awareness? Do you want them to like it, therefore they acknowledge it? Do you want them to click on something, to do something else? Do you want them to share it? Do you want them to leave a comment, right? So all these different interactions, they have those different weight value. Even inside your personas, there are some people who are more likely to do certain things in social media other than others. That's perfectly fine. I think what's most key and that's influential to your success is understanding that and seeing how you can leverage that into your communications that go out, and seeing what else you can amplify and influence in that standpoint. The last piece I want to bring up is social monitoring, right? So again, you have to be in the know, and this is one of the challenges inside of social media as a whole. Things rapidly change, right? This is all user-driven content. This is based on external factors, things that are happening in the news, things that are happening in the industry. Some of them are kind of, you can see coming a mile away. Some of them happen overnight. They're very kind of instant, right? Therefore, you have to be in a position to be able to kind of keep the consistent conversation going, as well as react to conversations that immediately happen. So a good example, a classic example of what you can see, what this means is, typically from a customer service standpoint. Right, customer service for the most part is kind of very peak and valley, right? So when you have a really good customer service day, that's great, but it's when you have a bad customer service day is when you immediately get all the responses or you get a lot of interaction. The question is, what do you do with that, right? And how do you incorporate that into your communications and how you're going to respond, right? So obviously in customer service, you should respond right away. You should at least acknowledge that somebody has reached out to you via social media and expressed, some sort of unhappiness with you, right? You cannot wait a week and then go back on social media and say, hey, we acknowledge your response. You can, but, it's not very well received, right? So that's, that's the customer service aspect. And what I mean more from social monitoring is, make sure that you have your pulse on topics that are of interest to your prospects, right? That pool of people who haven't quite converted to being a member, but they are the right mix of people for your membership group, right? Just, see what might be interesting to them, see what trending topics might relate to them, and what can you take advantage of late-breaking news or real-time campaigns that you could kind of leverage into conversation with them, right? The whole point here is to make sure that not only, of course, are you advertising or broadcasting your message out to your targeted people, but they are now taking notice, right? So again, from that standpoint, from a social media standpoint, we like to see organizations that are, they've got their planned schedule of communications in social media going out, And then they've got their campaigns that are overlaid on top of that so that they know, things that center around certain dates, have a lead up, the day of, there's activity, and then, winding down post-event, there's other activity as well. We definitely like to kind of see that trend. And then what we also want to see is just kind of the late breaking news, things that, again, make the day interesting, things that are very relevant to your industry. If there's late breaking news on the Hill, what does that mean for your members? What does that mean for, your lobbyists, right? What does that mean, right? So again, people are looking to your organizations to interpret that for them, right? So keep an eye on those breaking trends and seeing ways or thinking of ways where you can leverage your materials to get in front of those people ahead of time and like in real time, so that you can kind of make more of an impression, right? And really have that conversation with them. And so here's again, from a simple standpoint, right? So I've broken it down kind of very simply. You could try it out on Facebook, you could try it out on Twitter, but essentially it's a two-step process, right? So it's one, to build awareness, and the second piece is to activate your fans and convert them, right? So from building an awareness standpoint, that's why you would invest in ads, right? That's why you would do the paid advertising. So you're building awareness for people who, maybe they've heard of you or they've never heard of you, but they actually like your message. They feel compelled for your mission, and they're like, they're probably likely good for my professional career. Some combination or something, right? So again, your investment in getting in front of these people using paid social media is to grow your fan page, right? To grow your page with targeted consumers. Because again, even in social media advertising, you cannot say, I want to advertise to the world. Nobody will allow you to do that. Right? It's also very expensive if you want to go that approach. So again, they're kind of going down that funnel to say, well, we'll give you all these different ways to slice and dice your target audience, but you go ahead and you pick your audience that you think is most likely will be receptive to the message that you are trying to push. Again, that goes back to your personas. So making sure that you know your personas, you know where they live, you know how they breathe, you know how they go about their day-to-day activities, and what they're characterized by, what their background is, what their job history might be, what their professional development careers might be, all those different aspects. And you are sitting on a gold mine of that anyway, right? So I think everyone within your organization would be able to kind of stop you in the hallway and say, yes, the following people would have these types of characteristics. These are the demographics that describe them, So it's not like you're starting from blank slate. It's just to say, make sure you know your personas, because that becomes very important when you're looking to pick your target audiences. If you pick the wrong target audience, you can't do much, right? So a lot has to do with selectively choosing and knowing who you're talking to. So that's just building awareness, right? That's like you're launching a product, you have to get the name out there. How are you going to do that? It's not about so much saying, like, here's what the product does. You want to make sure that people are aware so that they come here. So what's nice about social media is that you have spaces in which to grow people, right? So you're building awareness, but you're also encouraging, like, come hang out on my site. Come hang out on my Facebook page, follow me on Twitter, right? Come to our LinkedIn page or group, right? So we're creating places where they're simply just generating awareness in that environment. So the second piece, after you've done that, is to activate. So all the people who are already on your page now that they're aware of, right? What you're doing now is you're posting your content, right? So you're doing content that's not so much building awareness. Now your content becomes very specific. It's about doing that clear conversion. If you want to pick imagery that's of a high quality, you definitely want to pick quality content, not just placeholder stuff, but something that's very specific and targeted to this group with a specific call to action. And then what you want to do is then, again, possibly use your advertising spend to boost those posts to expand the reach inside of your page, right? So hopefully you can kind of see, the trail that this leads you to, right? So it's a boost to get people to build awareness. Then you post your quality content because you've built your following of people. You're not quite sure who they are. You just call them prospects, right? And you think they're people who are most likely a good fit for your organization from a membership standpoint. And now you talk to them, right? And you talk to them. there, sorry about that. I seem to have been dropped. Let me give it a couple of more minutes and you guys can let me know via the chat if you can still hear me. All right, I will keep going then. Thank you. Sorry about that. Not sure what happened. Okay, so the point I was trying to make was essentially that, you know, try out this method. Again, you don't have to necessarily do it on a specific platform. Hopefully you see the direction that it's going in. Essentially, you want to build your awareness, get your people to your page where they might be interested, then start to activate and convert them by putting in posts that are meaningful, interesting pieces that in turn would encourage them to interact with you more, right? So it's leading them down, giving them the breadcrumbs to follow the trail, you know, ultimately to that bigger conversion where you can get them to be a member. So last time I talked about LinkedIn. This time I want to talk a little bit about Twitter, right? And it's really from that standpoint of don't dismiss Twitter, right? You know, out of hand. Again, we do deal with a lot of organizations who say that our members really aren't on Twitter, right? However, we have a presence on Twitter, which is good. It's a good place to start. I think what you want to do is think about, you know, again, your current members may not be, your prospects might be, you know, again, if you're experiencing or if you see coming down the pike a shifting in demographics from a generational standpoint of your membership, you know, it's transitioning or it will be in the next couple of years, you know, from baby boomers to leapfrogging over Gen X and going straight to millennials, and it's definitely something to think about. What's interesting about Twitter is its reach. So I attended the Digital Nail conference in Orlando a couple of weeks ago that's put on by Fusion Productions, a really good conference, and one of the speakers was from Twitter. She was talking about how Twitter is used from an advocacy standpoint. So I have a couple of slides from her presentation that really just lets you think about kind of the reach and what you could do, what the potential is inside of Twitter alone, right? So, you know, what this is saying is that 68% of DC elite, say people with influence in DC, they're well represented on Twitter, right? And now this is more kind of, you know, from that aspect of influence. I think it's generally not that surprising anymore that people get a lot of their source of news information from social media channels, either from Facebook, from Twitter in particular, because it's such late breaking news. In fact, you will probably find, you know, Twitter updates put out by many organizations first before they update their own website, right? So again, this statistic, again, is just going to, like, you know, among those elite users that are on Twitter with that presence, which of the 5 news sources do they, you know, go to, right? So what's interesting is to see, you know, the split. Right, again, Twitter is right up in there, right? It's essentially saying that it is the best vehicle for receiving information. So again, something to think about from that immediacy standpoint. There are a lot of ways in which you can tap into that, perhaps not in late breaking news, but certainly something along those lines, at least from a campaign perspective, you know, from that perspective. And again, just kind of reinforcing that, again, I think these are really interesting statistics. They say 4 in 5 journalists use Twitter as to source news, comments, quotes, and information. And so, you know, the way in which we consume information has changed. The way in which information is being, you know, broadcast out has also changed, right? So it's just really thinking about the impact of Twitter as a whole and starting to think about in the future, how could you tap into that, right? So I think another compelling piece, and I think this is the reason why we're seeing such an uplift inside of Twitter itself, is that 80% of Twitter users are mobile users. And that makes a lot of sense, right? So from that perspective, you know, you start to think now about, you know, things that you didn't have to think about before, and some of the things just go off the table, right? You know, from Twitter perspective, if everybody's on their phone, really the stuff you have to produce is not, you know, you don't have to go into heavy print. You don't have to look for big graphics. You really want to think about, you know, what's a small minimum amount of information that's compelling enough for me to get someone to do something with me, right? So it's still about content, though, and that's what's interesting is that, you know, even from Twitter's perspective, you may only have 140 characters, but you can pack a lot of content in there, right? And people are looking for that information. They're looking for that content. So from a Twitter standpoint, at least from an advertising standpoint, what you can do is you can promote your actual account, you can promote an actual tweet, and you can actually have a promoted trend as well, right? So it's a way to think about your content and your programs in a different light, right? So these are a lot of different options that we don't see a lot of organizations today really leverage very well. It's not that expensive. Again, you know, the cost is based on your impressions and what target market you go after. Obviously, as associations, you don't have to go after everyone, which makes it a lot easier than if you were a retail or CPG company. So I think that works in your favor, but there are certain things here that, you know, could be used to your advantage. Similar to how LinkedIn had their own funnel, I thought this was interesting. So again, this is from Twitter's standpoint. If you are using any of their sponsored content options, you know, they've got a funnel, right? And you can kind of see they kind of recommend, or these are recommendations of how you could do stuff to really target and get people down the funnel based on what you should be doing. So up at the top, you know, you're looking for you're opting for handles that are targeting broad interest categories, right? And then you're kind of starting to drill down to say, like, I'm now looking for like all the lookalikes, right? The people who might be of those handles who are interested in certain things, that's what I want to put in front of, right? Or I want to do my target audience list, right? So you're starting to think of, like, here are all the different ways that you could slice and dice, and it's a little bit different from what we saw on LinkedIn. LinkedIn was very kind of information that's based on your profile. Twitter is very much based on, like, who you're following, what you follow, and kind of what you're engaged with, right? So again, very immediate in terms of the information you're consuming, the information you're putting out there, right? It's a very different kind of flavor of that, but it's interesting, and I think it's something that you might want to consider as part of your marketing mix. All right, so I think Twitter is interesting because it still helps you find the right person, but it's tied to a location now, right? Because you can get very geographically specific, right? You can get it to be very specific from a time frame perspective because we are talking about real time, right? And you can send a very targeted message, right? So here are your different messages that you can send, right? You can send narratives, right? You can send a native video. You could do the Twitter cards, the website cards. You could do the rich imagery, right? So it all depends on kind of what your campaign is and what you're trying to do, but it's an interesting approach. And the reason I bring this up again is, you know, I don't want anyone to feel like they're locked into things. Nobody should feel like you can't do it because, right? So one of the things that, you know, we often see kind of out in the field is that many, I think, and it's an organizational cultural thing, many organizations get very caught up in the fact that many people have unsubscribed from the emails they send. Right? The unsubscribe list is an issue, or the opt-out list is an issue of contention, right? Every time we send an email, people opt out. We think we have a lot of opt-outs. How do we get them back in? And it's really hard to have that conversation because these are people who don't want to talk to you anymore for whatever reason, you know, rightly justified or not. There are people that you can no longer interact with, right? But organizations have a tendency to go after the people. It's like we go after things that we're not allowed to have, right? So they go after people who have already said, I don't want to hear anything from you in email. And they try to figure out ways, how can we email them again? The answer is you can't, right? But you could use Twitter to find them again, and you could communicate them via social media instead, right? So Twitter is interesting because what you could do in Twitter is, if you're doing any of these paid sponsored advertising components, right? If you're doing sponsored advertising with them, you know, as part of this outreach in targeting the funnel, you could upload a list of all those people who have opted out. Twitter could find a matching handle if you have that email address on file that happens to match what they've created in Twitter, and you could do an outreach program for them, right? Kind of saying, we miss you, or, you know, kind of saying, like, did you know, here's what's new with us. You could do sponsored video content, you know, very much the native video. Kind of, here's what's going on with us. Here's what we're working on. You do something like that. So hopefully that shows to you, you know, some of the different flavors of what you could do inside of social media to open back up the world that may have been closed off because one other component of your digital marketing mix kind of shut that down, right? So, you know, think about it from that standpoint. There is a lot of opportunity for you to grow inside of social media itself. Everyone is using social media very well from a broadcasting standpoint. I don't know that we can find examples of where we're saying, you know, this is a bad example. Everybody is kind of, I think, across the board, they've mastered their social media calendar planning. They've mastered how to represent themselves on different channels as well, right? Everybody's kind of come to that acknowledgement and said that we understand we cannot take the same message that we put on Twitter and put it on Facebook. We understand that, we're going to change it up, make it more compelling. It's going to be different. So from a broadcasting standpoint, from that promotional standpoint, everyone's doing very well. I think what we're seeing is in the gap is how do you use social media to do that conversion, right? And again, that takes a little bit of finesse and a little bit of coordination, right, with all of your team, right? And it still comes back to considering your content and your audience, knowing what content you have, knowing what appeals to your target audience in those channels, right? Not across the board, not as they read emails, but as they exist inside of whatever social channel that you're looking at, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever they might be, right? And then thinking about the timing and relevancy of what you want to put out in front of them, right? So again, you're kind of going to fish, but you're not going to fish at nighttime. Actually, that might be different. Maybe you do fish at nighttime, but you know what I mean, right? So again, we're thinking about ways in which we can capture a person's interest, a prospect's interest, and convert them to something. And so what that means is that you have to put a little bit of effort into your paid and your unpaid and paid social media marketing mix, right? Again, we're not saying that we've not seen that there's this magical number where it's 20% paid, 80% not paid. It's really kind of depends, and really it really can come down to campaign. You don't necessarily have to go full scale out for the entire campaign. You could do one activity as a part of a small subset of a campaign. Right. So again, thinking about which campaigns are designed to generate the leads, and I think that's what's going to be most relevant and important for you. Thinking about, which campaigns or what do we have that we need to generate interest, that we need to generate leads for, and where would that be most appropriate, right? Where can we tap into Twitter, right? Where can we tap into the power of LinkedIn? Do we have content that's really more for this? Or can we do something that's in real time and really get in front of people? Or do we have some re-engagement activities or welcome series that we have to do that could also be a part of this? All right, so these are common things that we have done for organizations. So certainly feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to see more examples or if you'd like to hear more of case studies or pain points of what organizations have done. But this is kind of really what some of the aspects or considerations you need to incorporate into your social media mix if you want to grow your membership and generate those leads. So I apologize for the technical difficulty. Hopefully that doesn't happen again, but it's hard to believe we're halfway through May. We have one more session next week scheduled where we will talk about measuring for success. And so this will be an interesting one because, again, we're now talking about metrics that are very specific to social media as a whole, right? And it really depends on how you measure those and what those mean to your organization. So a little bit more of a kind of a qualitative interpretation. It's not straight up open rates or click-through rates. So now we're talking about return on engagement, right? And thinking about, like, what does engagement actually mean, and can it be just a straight up number? Can it be mapped to one activity? Should it be mapped to multiple, combination or cross-selection of activities that are weighted differently? So hopefully everybody finds that interesting as well. Thank you very much for your time. Again, don't forget to participate in our survey. The market research that's happening, they'll be closing in June. We really would appreciate that. And I'll leave the line open for anyone who might have some questions that they want to put it in the chat window. Other than that, thank you very much and have a great Friday.